Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H, and I am here with.
Tom Andry, back from the brink of destruction, the Hurricane Irma, the the moment when I thought I was going to lose everything I owned in the world. So I am back. Yes.
Tom is back. Yes, that I put on Facebook and Twitter a little tease, didn't say who the co host would be tonight. It is Tom, the
I'm
regular
the
host.
I was going to say I'm the co-host, just like normal. I'll read the
Uh,
question.
that might have been a bad tease, but yeah.
Ah,
For anyone who's watching the live behind the scenes, still bafflingly more popular than the completed video at the end of it. But you're going to get to see how the sausage is made. You're going to get to see the whole green screen going on beside me now. So that's going to be fun for y'all.
all
But
right. That's right.
that's right. Yeah.
All right. So those of you that follow AV Rant on Facebook know that I was posting from the day of the I guess the day before the storm hit.
This is
Uh,
Hurricane Irma we're talking about
Hurricane
in
Irma. I
Florida.
live in the Tampa Bay area, and it was forecast like up until the time it actually made it actually turned, and even then they were saying it was going to turn back, and it was going to hit my house. Now, my house, as I said on the Facebook feed, I did my research. This house has never flooded in over 20 years, right? This was going to be the storm. This was going to be the one that was going to flood it for sure. There was no doubt in anybody's mind. Everybody in this neighborhood, people who've lived here all their lives, have never evacuated. This place was a ghost town. Uh, I do have a house that's very low in comparison. I got lucky. It actually, and this is the second time this happened to me. I left. I went to Lakeland to go stay with Clint DeBoer of formerly of Audioholics, now of Pro Tool Reviews. I went to go stay with him. It turned and followed me. Okay, it
Ah.
followed me to Lakeland and hit Lakeland. So Lakeland, I am sorry that you got hit by this hurricane. I am not sorry that I was on the other side. My house was on the other side of it, because instead of pushing water into the Tampa Bay like it was supposed to do, it actually pulled all the water out. It was
Mm.
insane. I had people, local friends, on Facebook posting pictures of them walking where there's the seawall, which is like 5 feet high on their right side. On the left, it's dark, but you can't even see where the water starts. It's pulled that much water out of the bay. It
Wow.
was insane. So I got extremely lucky. We came back. We had fences down.
Hmm.
Uh, but they're fences that connect to my neighbor's yard, and I've fixed those fences multiple times by myself without their help. So they have dogs and I don't. If their dogs poo in my yard, I'm just going to throw through the opening between our two yards. But I'm not super. I got bigger fish to fry right now than those fences. We spent the better part of the day after, I guess Tuesday we came back. Was it Tuesday? It must have been Tuesday we came back, and because Monday was sort of the day it was all going down. Tuesday we came back and surveyed the damage. We spent almost all day. I guess we came back Monday, because Tuesday we spent all day cleaning up the yard, which took forever. I've got some huge trees. A lot of stuff fell down. So, but nothing fell in the house. I was very fortunate in that too. A lot of very large. I'm talking, you know, diameter 5 to 6 foot trees went over in my neighborhood. Took down power lines. Took down all kinds of stuff. We were without power. I still have a line that's down in the backyard. I think it's an old telephone line that isn't used anymore, but it's just sort of, it's still connected to everything. It just fell off one of the poles, and now is lying across where my fence used to be. So we spent the entire day cleaning up. It was ruthless. It was just
Mm.
unbearable heat. And then that night, after we got done, we started driving around just to get out of the heat. Gas was scarce. Food was scarce. Gas was really scarce in the morning. Like, there was none. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they let a tanker in to like the Tampa Bay to come in, and those trucks started going out. We started getting some gas later on in the afternoon, but there was no food anywhere. There was no gas anywhere. Power was out all over the town. When you drove into my neighborhood, we're talking like 20 blocks from my house, it was black at that point, and on both sides of you, as far as you can see, all the way up into my house and throughout my entire neighborhood, black. Absolutely no power. None. I was like, this is, and they're like, oh, you're going to get your power back by Friday. I'm like, maybe, maybe, but it's Florida heat and I don't want to be here. So what we did was my wife looked at our finances and our budget, and we had budgeted some money aside to go on a small vacation during Christmas. So we took that Christmas vacation money and we found some really cheap tickets up to New York. And I have a cousin that lives up there, and we're like, we're out. So we like within 12 hours we were gone. So we stayed at my brother-in-law's house, who lives in like way more trees, way more, way older neighborhood, never lost power. What are you going to do? It's just the way it works. Stayed at his house one night, and then we left. We went to New York. We didn't come back till Sunday. So by the time we got back, we had gotten power like on Wednesday or Thursday. I think it was Thursday we got power. Okay. But our friends who live less than half a mile away, we walk to their house all the time. They didn't get power back until like 8 p.m. on Saturday. So they stayed at our house while we had power. They stayed at our house waiting for their house to finally get power back.
Oh, so they were kind of house sitting for you almost.
Sure, we call it that. Our house was a wreck though, because we had pulled everything off the ground and lifted everything up. So there was just stuff everywhere. We had spent all day cleaning the yard because that was the majority of the real mess. And the inside we didn't touch. So they were living in squalor. It must have felt like that. So I was extremely fortunate. I got a lot of messages, emails, and Facebook messages and everything else from people. I didn't respond to all of you. I'm sorry about that, mostly because I didn't take my computer with me when I left. I don't know why I didn't take my computer, but I did when I went to Clint's. But when I went to New York, I didn't take it with me. So I didn't respond to a lot of your emails and messages, but know that I read them all, and thank you all for thinking of me and keeping me in your prayers and that sort of thing. It was very stressful. More so myself, I mean, I got kids, I got a house. I basically walked through the house and went, I really can live without all this stuff. I'll be fine. I don't need any of this stuff. I don't need any of it. So I took, if you want to know the electronics I took of course, my computer, my laptop. I took the desktop computer. I took, it was just because of all the stuff that was backed up on it. I took, the retro gaming system that was because I knew if I took that, I could hook it into something and the kids would have something to do.
Right. Yeah.
Like squat someplace for a while. I took both of my Oppo sets of headphones and my phone, and that was it. That was the electronics I took. We took some pictures and we were out, and we didn't take much else. Just enough clothes to live on, one nice set of clothes, that sort of thing, and a bunch of Florida clothes, and we just left. So again, it was a very, very stressful time. I was freaking out.
Yeah.
Up. I mean, I'm usually very good in the crisis, and I was good in this one too. But my wife was like, "You were kind of freaking me out. You were so freaked out." I'm like, "Dude, we have always said if a category 3 or higher was coming towards us, we would leave, and we were discussing not leaving, and it was like, no, we've got to go."
Yeah.
If it had done what they said it was going to do, it would have kind of skirted through Naples and then gone back out into the Gulf a little bit, and then hit my area at a category 4. The devastation would have been.
Oh yeah. Immense. Well, I mean, we've all seen images of the places that were hardest hit, and
oh yeah. I mean, there's islands in the Caribbean that are just destroyed.
Oh, it's straight leveled. Gone. I mean, straight up leveled. Yeah.
And we don't even know what's going on with the Keys yet. So, and then we got Maria coming this way too. So everybody's real happy about that. But we'll take it one storm at a time. So I do it again. Thank you guys so much for all of your messages. It was very appreciated and helpful. And those of you that were commenting on the videos I was shooting with Clint over in Lakeland, that was also nice too. It was just a way to relieve the tension for us.
Well, sure, yeah.
Both kind of freaking out. So, all right.
Yeah, I mean, we know, we can see you're in your house. It's still standing.
Yep.
You have electricity. Water. Your podcasting gear obviously must have survived because you're using it right now. So all in all, could have been worse. Thankfully,
honestly, it couldn't have been better, to be honest with you. To have a storm of that magnitude coming towards you and to come out of it with some limbs down and your fence destroyed. and that's about it. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no water in the house. There was no
Yeah.
water, there was no flooding anywhere in this area. So I really feel very fortunate that we walked away from that as well as we did. And I'm hoping I don't have to ever evacuate like that again.
Well, yeah, yeah.
I'm hoping, but
Well, we're very, very happy to have you back. And do want to say, I mean, I want to say thank you to everybody who wrote in, because I saw the messages at least on Facebook, and that it was really nice and heartening to know that, you know, this whole community is like, yeah, we're behind Tom. We're wishing him and wishing him the best and his family the best, and praying for him. And you know, I want to thank Lee and Austin as well, who stepped in Tom's absence. You know, so huge thanks to the AV Rant community all around, from me as well as from Tom. So yeah, that's it was nice to see that support there.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Austin. I should listen to the podcast that Austin was on, but he talked about the review, how the
oh yes, I asked him. So yeah, he's definitely enjoying what's going on there. He didn't have the subs all tuned in because he's following the whole procedure that we wrote out together. Right. So you know, he's going through it step by step. But yeah, he had a bit of a grin on his face describing the PB16 Ultra subwoofers. So and he did want to say we were correct. They barely fit through the door when they were in their boxes. So they SVS measured that out. They're like, yeah, you need yourself a 36-inch door here and at your front door to get those in. So
or you take them out of the box. That's your other option. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. That's a very good place to get us. YouTube.com/C/AVRant. That's where you can see your question answered or watch these 2-hour videos when they go up. Rob puts up a nicer version than the one that's the live one that just kind of sits up there being ugly. But he does put up a nicer version of that if you're interested in that. Plus, each individual question or sometimes groups of questions get their own little video, and Austin takes care of that. You can hit us up on directly if you want to. Rob@avrant.com, Tom@avrant.com. Rob's Twitter is @FirstReflect. Mine is @avrant_Tom. Let's see here. If you want to, we also have our producer, Austin. He does all our videos, as I said. His is @Austin, TEN, Austin Pond. He's also got his own podcast, the We Watch Movies podcast. It's a podcast about not actually watching movies. I don't know why they call it that, but it's about watching YouTube videos, specifically the ones about lancing things.
You know, oh yes,
those ones right there.
Those are quite popular.
They are very popular. His podcast is huge because he reviews them, and people are like, you know, they debate on the comments, and people get real into it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't watch. I mean, I can watch a little bit of it, but you know, I don't know. I think it's mostly like moms, because you know how your mom, maybe your mom wasn't this way, but my mom certainly was. My mom was a nurse, so maybe that had something to do with it. And my wife is also this way. If she sees a pimple, man, she is coming after it. Like she's like, "Ooh, there's a good one on your face." I'm like, get away. You know, I mean, so apparently, the We Watch Movies podcast about.
We watch movies.
Popping stuff.
I guess you could call that a movie. It's a moving image.
It is a moving image. All right, before we get started here, I want to thank our listeners of the week. There's a couple of ways you can become listener of the week. One way is by going to www.avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. There you can leave us a PayPal donation through your credit card or your PayPal account. So we want to thank Barry, Todd, Timothy, and Luke for doing that.
Yeah, Barry, Todd, Timothy, Luke, thank you so much for those donations. There's an outside chance that in all the confusion and everything that somebody's name did get missed. As I was saying, over the past couple of weeks, I don't get to see the donations as they roll in. So we tried to make sure we went back and got everybody who donated over the past couple of weeks. But if your name was somehow left out, please just let us know. We want to thank you publicly on the podcast. We're certainly not editing out anybody's name intentionally. So yeah, let us know.
That's right. There's not a dollar threshold that gets you
definitely
gets you mentioned. We don't have that.
I mean, I haven't said this in a long time, but very seriously, if you donate $1, if everybody who listened to this podcast donated $1, that'd be a huge, that would pay for our year, basically, wouldn't it? Bandwidth wise.
So yeah, probably. Yeah.
Everybody so
podcast. Well, if you donate $1 a month.
Oh well, easily.
That would be that would
Yeah.
be we would do more podcasts.
So please don't anybody think that you have to like get yourself up to some $25 level or something.
Going, man. I know. See if that will, because I think some people like that, but we just haven't gotten around to it. I'll try to do that. All right, in the news, Yuri Gutskin.
I'm going with Yuri Gutskin. Yeah.
Goodskin wrote an excellent comprehensive explanation of all the current HDR standards for flat panels HD. That is a website. Flat panels HD is one word. I skimmed through it. I actually read quite a bit of it, but I skimmed through it. Yeah, it's a little confusing, and I mean, he does his best.
Yeah,
it's confusing, and I think the thing that people don't often realize is a lot of times you're talking about like, one thing is built for streaming, another thing's built for Blu-ray, another thing's built for movies or something like that. So it all sort of, you're like, what are they all arguing about? Well, they're kind of talking on top of each other, across each other. So there is a little bit of that going on, but I don't know that we're going to see a format war for this. I think there's too many.
If we get to that question we should get to that question. Yeah. So
I don't know if we're going to see a format war for that, but anyways, we'll get into that.
Yeah, no, it's a good article, and yeah, I mean, to me, I just enjoyed the fact that it's a long article, it's in depth, it's comprehensive, it's really good. If you're interested in this, it's a great article to check out. We'll have the link at avrant.com in our show notes. But I was like, gee, I wonder why the public might be slightly confused about HDR. It's like, in order to explain it properly, this is what you have to do, which is ridiculous. So yeah.
Right, and when it's just the problem it comes, I think what it really comes down to is they're trying to sell more TVs. I mean, the end result of all this is they want to sell more TVs, and they quickly realize that upping the resolution from 1080p to 4K wasn't enough. I mean, people buy them because that's the only thing that's out there, but they're not ditching their current TVs because they can go to 4K. No one looks at it and goes, I mean, even in the store, side by side, you're like, which is the better one supposed to be? The HDR, the high dynamic range, that's really the selling point that they're trying to push. But which means lots of acronyms, lots of things that people are trying to slap on the side of their TV to make you think it's better than everybody else's. We'll get to that in a second. Same website, Flat Panels HD, also had a list of all the movies that are now available in 4K from iTunes. And we have been getting emails from people reporting that they are indeed getting free updates from their 1080p versions for the movies they already own, which I believe I predicted that you were not going to get free updates. So I was wrong. But good on Apple, I guess.
Yeah, kudos where kudos are due. That's a good customer service relation thing to do there. It's like, hey, you already bought this movie in HD, you get the 4K version now that it's available. Nice.
Just as of the latest update, there are 154 movies total, 80 of them in Dolby Vision, only a few in HDR10. So you can check that out. Didn't Apple just release like $1,000 iPhone?
Yes, the iPhone 10. It's going to be $1,000 for the basic version. No more home screen, or home button rather. It's all screen.
So how are you supposed to? I guess my phone doesn't have a home button.
No, I mean, it's a tap it, and then a face unlock.
Do you do the? You don't do the fingerprint anymore?
No more thumbprint. As somebody pointed out, there's certain that Apple will release a dongle that adds a thumbprint scanner, because that's how they roll.
They do. I was watching something. I don't remember how I was seeing it, but I think it was like playing in the background in like a restaurant bar I was in or something like that. And they were like, augmented reality, Apple makes it mainstream. I'm like, I don't really think they made it mainstream. I mean, pretty sure IKEA did that like a long time ago, right? Didn't IKEA have that? And now they have all the paint stuff too, like the Home Depot things. You put your phone up there, you could change the color of your walls and look through your phone and see it. So I don't really think Apple invented that, but way to take credit.
And they talked as though they invented HDR as well. No, it was interesting seeing this selection of movies that are available on iTunes in 4K. Now, first of all, Fox is like, you don't get HDR from us because we're all HDR 10 plus now. So, nuts to anybody who wants HDR from 20th Century Fox. There are no Disney titles at all because they're not supporting 4K on iTunes just just yet, and they aren't happy about the not charging any extra over the HD versions that Apple announced, so they'll have to work something out there with Disney. Warner Brothers, though, they are all over that Dolby Vision. I mean, if they can do it, they're doing it. So it's interesting because there are movies now on iTunes in Dolby Vision that don't have Dolby Vision on the Ultra HD Blu-ray release. So it means, hey, at some point they mastered it in Dolby Vision, obviously. So maybe they could re-release it on Ultra HD Blu-ray or something to that effect. Yeah, I mean, clearly Dolby Vision is being... I was surprised that there are actually very few titles that are HDR10. That's the lowest number, so the majority of them have Dolby Vision. Second highest is 4K without any HDR of any sort, and that was weird because there's movies that have been released on Ultra HD Blu-ray, all of which have at least HDR10, but a bunch of them don't have HDR of any kind on iTunes, so that's weird. And then a small number that have HDR10 on iTunes. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see.
We'll see. All right, so I got some a comment here. Nathan thought it was interesting to read Netflix's display calibration best practices. Now, I thought it was interesting to read as well because I wasn't sure who this was supposed to be for. But anyways, he says it all looks very applicable to any home theater for anyone who wants to put in a bit of effort to control their ambient light levels and measure their light output from their display. It requires a light meter. It requires use of CalMan, which I've used before. It's not that hard to use. At least it wasn't when I did it. Certainly wasn't super duper intuitive, but it's probably gotten better in the years because they were very good about updating that thing. So I mean, it seemed to me like this was for like professional settings or something.
Well, this was for mastering content that you intend to send to Netflix for them to stream to their subscribers. So this is on the content creation side.
Right.
But as Nathan is pointing out, he's like, well, if that's the way they're creating the content, then it would make sense if you're able to at home to have those same conditions because they define what your ambient light level should be, which in the case for SDR, standard dynamic range is 10 lux for the background light with as much as 10 lux behind the screen.
Right.
And then, yeah, just, it gave some nice figures for if you have a bright ambient light setting, a medium ambient light setting, a low ambient light setting. So the low ambient light setting, this 10 lux background, is when SDR would top out at 100 nits. But then they give some other figures like, hey, for a bright room setting, let's bump that all the way up to 250 nits at the top of the scale. So some interesting things there that you could be very applicable for home use. On the HDR side, they actually want the ambient light to only be 5 lux.
Seems awesome
so
dark.
That's very well. In other words, get yourself a pitch black room, bring in 5 candles. And there you go. That's as bright as the ambient light is supposed to be when watching HDR. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, when it comes down to it, when you calibrate your display, you're supposed to be doing a lot of this stuff anyways.
Right.
You're supposed to do it in a pitch black room, essentially. And what they were telling you is like set the black levels, check the white balance, set the black levels again, check the black levels, make sure they haven't shifted back and forth. I mean, that's just basic calibration technique. There's nothing really revolutionary in there, but it was interesting that they set some of those light levels, which I don't know how many people are actually doing that, and I don't know how many people who are mastering for Netflix need to read this and have any idea. I can imagine.
I mean, there are people who are like producing their own comedy specials and stuff. So they might not be video professionals, but they're putting up a comedy special on Netflix.
That's true, but I doubt they're editing it themselves.
Well,
mastering it themselves. So I think what's generally happening is somebody's finding these things, or Netflix is saying, you want to put something up on our website, you have to have this. Somebody looks at it and says, and hands it to the person who's doing that, and make sure that this is the person looks at it and goes, oh, shut up, and throws it away. And that's the end of that. I think that's what happens, but it is good that they put something down in writing. All right, let's get to these questions because I like to get through them as fast as possible because, believe it or not, I'm exhausted from the fact that we got home last night and I have still got a house to clean. I haven't been at work in a week and a half. Neither has my wife. And it backs up pretty big. All right, Nathan. Nathan says he was a bit surprised that there was very little talk about HDMI 2.1 at CEDIA in 2017. Clearly, it will be necessary for 8K, but according to Panasonic, HDR10 Plus will be possible using existing HDMI 2.0B ports, and features like EARC have already been confirmed as future firmware updates for some products without needing HDMI 2.1. What is EARC? Is that
That's
different
the
than regular?
enhanced audio return channel that
So
can
it's
handle
better than-
lossless audio.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
All right. That has Nathan wondering about future proofing, or perhaps present proofing would be a better term. Oppo said they aren't sure yet whether or not they'll be able to add HDR10 Plus to their UDP 203 and 205 Ultra HD Blu-ray players. LG said they're still evaluating HDR10 and 10 Plus and figuring out if they'll be able to add it to their OLED and Super UHD TVs in the event that the format actually gains enough industry support. So if I remember correctly from reading this thing, HDR10 Plus is like the free version of Dolby Vision, right?
Yeah.
It's the metadata on top. And it
It's the
allows
dynamic metadata where there's metadata on a scene by scene or even down to a frame by frame basis, as opposed to base HDR10, which is static metadata. So one peak light level for the entirety of the movie, and therefore everything gets tone mapped according to that one peak brightness.
But HDR10 Plus does not require a license that Dolby does, right?
Well, now you're supposed to pay a license to the HDR10 Plus partnership, I think is the official name.
It's not alliance. It's usually an alliance.
Yeah, but that wasn't the word they used. They use partnership. So there's they call it a nominal fee, and that basically just gives you access to all of the technical documentation for how you're supposed to match this thing. Then there's no royalty or anything beyond that. Yeah. That's it. So it's an alternative to Dolby Vision, doing a similar thing, dynamic metadata. That's HDR10 Plus.
All right. Samsung and Panasonic have both said that they'll be adding HDR10 Plus to several of their existing 2017 TVs, although they have no plans to support Dolby Vision as a result, because Dolby Vision, I'm guessing, is a lot more expensive. So if someone wanted to buy a TV, a receiver, and an Ultra HD Blu-ray player today, what is the safest bets? Nathan figures if any existing TV brand is going to support all of the HDR formats, it's probably LG. And similarly, Oppo is probably the most likely to support all the HDR formats on their Ultra HD Blu-ray players, so long as it's technically possible. So do we agree? What about AV receivers? I think AV receivers, unless there's some reason why HDR10 Plus can't be just passed through, because all this is metadata, I don't see why your receiver, as long as it can pass through and that it has the bandwidth, it should just be able to pass things through. I don't think that that's really much of an issue there. It's the other two, the display and the source, that you have to worry about.
Yeah. The AV receiver should be just passing the signal through, but hey, I've been wrong about this stuff before, because Dolby Vision, it just has to pass it through. And as it turns out, some models that were previously announced, or not announced, but previously weren't included in the list of things that were going to be supporting Dolby Vision, well, now it's looking as though, particularly like some of the 2016 Pioneer models, which were never on any of the lists to support Dolby Vision pass-through, they're like, well, we work with Onkyo now, turns out we probably can make this software thing happen, Dolby Vision's gaining support, maybe we don't want to force all of our customers to have to buy new gear. Maybe it would be good customer service to let them pass this signal through. So HDR10 Plus doesn't require any more bandwidth than what HDMI 2.0A can already deliver. So it's not that there isn't enough bandwidth on the port. If there's enough, firmware upgradability to be able to add Dolby Vision, there should be enough to let you just pass through HDR10 Plus. But I've been wrong before, so can't say with any certainty on the AV receiver side, but it's not doing any decoding or anything. It's mostly the display I'd be worried about. I agree, if anybody's going to support everything, it's LG, because they're the only ones supporting Technicolor HDR, which there's no content for it, but they're like, yeah, we're on board, bring it on.
Might as well. It's free, isn't it?
Yeah, Dolby Vision already, HDR10 of course, and HLG as well, hybrid log gamma. So they're on top of it all, and they even said, they're like, yeah, we're evaluating HDR10 Plus. If there's content for it, we'll probably support it. So they they do seem like the safest bet, and I agree as well. Oppo, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be them. But they said they straight up don't know. The chip that they put in there, they said, was like one of the earliest chips that was designed to be able to support Dolby Vision.
Right.
So every Ultra HD Blu-ray player supports HDR10. Basic HDR10, that was mandated. That's part of the Ultra HD Blu-ray specification. You have to support that. But Dolby Vision is optional. HDR10 Plus isn't even part of the Ultra HD Blu-ray specification. It's not even an option in the specification yet. That has to get added first. So, yeah, if you're buying something right now, I do agree. An LG OLED or a Super UHD TV, probably your best bet, but no guarantees. Oppo, probably your best bet, but no guarantees. And if you get one of the newest AV receivers that can already pass through Dolby Vision, out of the box, that's your safest bet. It's not a guarantee, but that's your safest bet.
Yeah. And when it comes to manufacturers like Samsung and stuff, whatever they support with their TVs are probably going to support with their players. So
yeah,
we'll have to watch them for the future.
But I mean, Samsung seems committed to not using Dolby Vision, as does Panasonic. Now, Panasonic at IFA, some of the reps said, if it turns out that Dolby Vision just takes over the industry and our customers demand it, we will add it. And I imagine Samsung eventually would too.
Absolutely.
But for now, they're like, we think HDR10 Plus is the better alternative. So that's where they are.
All right. Ping Pong Theater Ed. So I didn't remember why I started calling him this. I assumed that
because at one point he had an unfinished basement with a ping pong table in it. So that was
right.
So
first, he's got an update here. Ed decided to upgrade his speakers to the ELAC Unify towers and center. He carefully scheduled his delivery date so his wife wouldn't find out. But Amazon messed up, and one of the speakers was actually a debut series model. They corrected the shipping error immediately, but that resulted in his wife noticing a large, heavy box on their porch when the correct speaker was delivered. So sometimes you just can't win. Dude, you should. Well, whatever. His photos still show his old JBL speakers, but they can give us a good idea of what his finished basement looks like right now. He put some acoustic panels behind his seats and a foam one behind his center speaker, but he figures it could benefit from some added absorption. The room is fully carpeted and sounds pretty quiet and free from echoes already. However, when he walks over to the stairwell, it's an echoey mess over there. That's not surprising. Also, his theater leaks sound into the family room at the top of the stairs. So could absorption panels help with those two issues? And if so, how should you place the panels? Well, the echoey mess up in your stairway is completely understandable. That's exactly, you're hearing what happens when you, in a very small space, you bounce some sound around. That's the way that's going to go. You can reduce the echoes by putting absorption panels on the walls around that go up that stairwell there. That can easily reduce the amount of echo that's going on there. I don't think it'll eliminate it. Now, the second question though is how about his sound leaking into the family room at the top of the stairs.
Right.
Therein is a much bigger problem, because this is, first of all, we know that some of the paths of sound are going to be through the structure. So you're shaking the floor, you're shaking the walls, your speakers are connected to the floor, your speakers are connected to the cabinet they're on, and then that's connected to the floor. The speakers are connected to the wall, probably into a joist in there someplace where you have securely anchored it because you didn't want it to fall down for his rear speakers up there. Not surprising that there's going to be some sound transference that way. Plus, there's a door at the top of the stairs, I'm hoping, and some of it's going to get out that way as well. So, stopping the sound leakage is not like, if I add some more panels, will that stop it? The answer is almost certainly not.
No, absorption panels aren't going to help you with the sound leakage. For that echoing inside of the stairwell there, putting some absorption panels in that small area going up the stairs, even if it's only on one side of the wall, because the sound is bouncing back and forth. So if you absorb it on one side, that helps. But that's not going to prevent the leakage. Now, looking at the photo and remembering back a ways, I don't think he ever put up a hard surface to finish his ceiling.
Right. It does look soft up there.
Yeah, I think that was like a flexible fabric or something up there for the ceiling. So, I mean, that unfortunately means sound is going to travel upstairs. I mean, even if you put
Well, if you
insulation
look at
there,
the picture from the side where you can see the stairwell, it almost looks like his ceiling is sort of hanging, and
yeah,
it looks like
yeah,
you can see the joists in there. Like, I don't know, that could just be where the fabric is like sewn together or something. I don't
that's
know,
right.
but it looks kind of that way. So one of the things that you can do is, put a bunch of insulation up there and finish that ceiling in 2 layers of
And that
drywall.
it doesn't have it doesn't have to be drywall. It could be a drop ceiling.
It's true.
Yeah,
That's
because
true.
the majority of, I mean, this is waves of any type.
Yep.
When they meet a new medium, the majority of it reflects back. But when you just have a fairly porous surface like fabric where the air can literally move through it, even when you have insulation above that, it's not the same as having some sort of solid, continuous surface for a lot of that sound energy to reflect off of before it penetrates up into the insulation above it. So a drop ceiling would likely help the sound leakage issue. For the door that's at the top of the stairs, weather stripping around it, because you don't necessarily have to replace the whole door, it's the gaps where the
Right.
air is getting through. So weather stripping around the existing door could help you there as well. But absorption isn't going to help you with the
No,
soundproofing.
it's not gonna help you with soundproofing, but, and remember, you put a lot of times the air return in your room
Mm-hmm.
is the gap under your door. So, by weather stripping all this stuff, you run the risk of not getting air return, which
Mm.
means it's not gonna cool down, or it's not gonna heat up. It's not gonna change temperature because your AC is not gonna be able to push that much air into it because there's no place for it to circulate back out of.
Yeah.
So
Air has to enter and exit the room for it to be effective.
So you run that risk too, but the biggest thing you could do is do something to that ceiling. If we're looking at this correctly, add a bunch of insulation up there, put some sort of ceiling up there. If it's a drop ceiling, if it's some drywall, if it's whatever, just something. I mean, you could just put the insulation and see how much that helps, because I imagine that's going to help
I
a bunch.
I think I recall that he did put the insulation up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely looking like a fabric cover. So
Yeah.
T-bar ceiling would do the job.
All right. So where else should he put the acoustic panels? He asked. In particular, he's seen a lot of pictures where people put panels behind their front speakers. Should he do that? And how do you know when it would be beneficial to have panels behind your front speakers versus not? Well, it's generally always advantageous to have panels behind your. Now, this panel that you have behind your center channel is not acoustic. I mean, it's acoustic foam stuff.
Yeah.
It's not really
It's
all
not
of that.
doing much.
It's not doing much back there. It might make you feel better, but it's not doing much. You need an actual panel. You need an actual, layer of rock wool or fiberglass, rigid fiberglass back there. And you could do that behind your speakers as well. Will it make a huge sonic difference? I don't know. Probably not, but it will do something. And you've got a huge wall, and you've got a lot of walls in here that are mostly bare. So if you're planning on trying to get rid of that echo up in the stairwell, putting stuff on that wall at the stairwell will create some absorption there. You got absorption behind your head, which is good. Putting some more absorption on that front wall behind the center channel, behind the two speakers. I mean, it's going to be absorbing some of the sound from the speakers, the direct sound, but it's also going to absorb some reflected sound as well. So all those things would be beneficial.
Yeah. Overall, though, you don't want to overdamp the room, which is possible to do.
Yeah.
And he said it's already not really, echoey or loud or anything. It's only in that stairwell, which I don't imagine you're watching a ton of movies from the stairwell. So that's not
Well, that's the other thing too.
necessarily a problem even.
Just because the bass sounds really good in my friend's bathroom doesn't mean that I think he should go put a bass
Right.
strap in there. I mean, it's just so happens that it happens to travel down the hall. How does it sound at your seat? Does it sound echoing terrible at your seat? Or can you hear the echoes that are happening in the stairwell from your seat, and that's why it's bothering you? Because if it's just I'm walking in the room, it sounds terrible in this hallway. Well, who cares?
Yeah. So, work out how much surface area you have and try to get between 30 and 40% of that surface area covered in absorption. Behind the speakers is a great place. In the corners of the room is a great place to add absorption. But once you've got between 30 and 40% of the surface area, and that's all 6 surfaces, so ceiling, floor, and 4 walls, once 30 to 40% of that is covered in absorption, you don't need to do more. At that point, you'll just be over-deadening the room. So
I think a tri-trap in that front left corner would be okay. There's room for it there. You could also put tri-traps on the ground, flanking your your cabinet there at the very front of the room. You could also put them behind your couch, which I did. I don't imagine there's much back there. I can't tell if his couch is pushed right up against the wall. It
It's
looks
pretty close
it
to it. It
looks
looks
very
like, yeah.
close. Yeah. So maybe you couldn't do that. You could also put them up near the ceiling as well, maybe around your behind your head, up above there. That'd be some good bass trapping there. So he says he has a small separate setup in the corner just for 2-channel listening. He uses he uses Boston VR2 speakers and a monoprice tube amp, but sometimes he likes to switch over to an old AV receiver for digital sources and a bit more amplifier power. This requires physically unplugging the speakers from one amp and plugging them into the other. So is there a switch he could use to make it a bit more convenient? One pair of speakers, 2 amps, obviously only 1 amp active at a time. There are I'm not you're a Google search away from a speaker selection switch. It's basically
Yes.
what you're looking for. There's a bunch of them out there. Amazon will have your bag, I'm sure. Where else?
Monoprice.
Monoprice.
That's where I'm going to suggest.
Okay, well then Monoprice. Let's go with Monoprice. There's a bunch of them.
$17. So it's not, shouldn't break the bank.
Seems reasonable.
And what's interesting about this speaker selector switch, so that you could actually have the way it's supposed originally intended. If you look at the connections on the back, what you have is 1 stereo input and 4 stereo outputs. The idea being you could feed 1 source and select up to 4 different pairs of speakers to play that source out of. Now you're actually going to be doing it in reverse, because this is just a passive switch. You know,
Right.
It's just switching which metal connectors are connected to which inside. So even though over on the left side of the back it's labeled inputs, that's actually where you're going to connect your 1 pair of speakers. You're going to do this backwards. Your inputs are going to be your speaker outputs, and you're going to use 1 and 2 or whatever it is of the outputs as your inputs in this case, because you have 2 amps and 1 pair of speakers rather than
Right.
1 amp and 2 pairs of speakers. Now, you have to be a little bit careful, because you can actually, with this switch, have if you did it the intended way, which is 1 amp, multiple speakers, you can actually have more than 1 pair of speakers active at a time, because it's just a manual push button thing. So you definitely don't want to do that.
Right. That would be bad.
Yeah, you don't want to have both amps active at the same time into 1 pair of speakers. Now, in your case, you're probably not even going to have both amps powered on at the same time, but a little bit of care is all you need with this. But for $17, you can do what you want to do. So Monoprice has you covered there.
All right. Infinite Gary. Gary understands the concept of wide color gamut in theory. He can look at the triangles on the color diagram and understand that the DCI P3 or Rec 2020 is a bigger triangle encompassing more shades of red, green, and blue than Rec 709 triangle. But he tends to evaluate things by looking at actual content. Could we give him an example of a real scene from a real movie that would help him understand what he's really looking for? He's going from a Runco projector that uses an LED light source that supposedly delivers very accurate Rec 709 color. He's upgrading to a JVC projector that uses a lamp and has the option to put either a DCI P3 color filter at the light path or at the expense of maximum brightness, or stay at Rec 709. Let me say that again, because that was confusing to me and I said it. So he has the option of either putting a DCI P3 color filter in the light path, which will be at the expense of maximum brightness. It will dim his image somewhat.
Right.
Or he can stay at Rec 709 color while delivering brighter HDR highlights. So on the actual scene from an actual movie, what's all that going to look like? What are the differences he should be looking for to help him evaluate what settings look best? What you really need is, instead of us telling you an actual movie, because I mean, you could take any HDR movie, you know, with Dolby Vision or whatever that you got. And
well, Dolby Vision won't help you on a projector, so
that's true.
That won't matter.
You
HDR10.
You can get your HDR10 movie, watch it on your projector, and then somehow try to switch back and forth really, really quick, which of course is never going to happen fast enough for you to actually notice it. I would recommend you look into some sort of demonstration disc, and you can get those. I mean, you can get them from Dolby. You can get them from a bunch of other places. Sometimes you can buy them. A lot of times after places like Cydia, and Cydia just ended, people will be walking around with oodles of those things because they pass them out. So it's a matter of finding somebody who's got one, and then inevitably somebody will burn it to something and then post it on, whatever the BitTorrent thingy is that you like the best. You can find it that way as
I
well.
suppose.
I don't necessarily suggest that you do that, but you can get those discs. But what you're looking for here is is a very good question, because you're going from a smaller triangle to a bigger triangle, which means yes, you're going to get a lot more colors in there, but how are you going to see them absolutely within one scene? Or I mean, I imagine he wants to like freeze frame it and just look at it and then switch back and forth somehow. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I'll give a few concrete examples. Because I mean, I imagine you're now going to be buying some Ultra HD Blu-rays. I think he already got the Oppo Ultra HD Blu-ray player ready to go. So Deadpool is a great example, because you can actually just look at Deadpool's costume.
It's very red,
and that deep shade of red is outside of the Rec. 709 gamut. So if you just freeze frame on Deadpool's costume, which he's in the movie plenty for you to do that, if you switch between the Rec. 709 setting and the DCI-P3 setting, you'll notice that in DCI-P3, it's a deeper, richer shade of red for his costume. So that's pretty easily visible. Another great example would be The Martian, the Matt Damon movie, because on there they have the headlamps on his spacesuit.
Right.
So particularly at the beginning of the movie, where they're in the sandstorm that kicks up and they've all got their headlamps on. When you're watching it in HDR, so you could compare the Blu-ray that comes in the Ultra HD Blu-ray package. So if you compare the regular Blu-ray, which is Rec. 709 color and standard dynamic range, to the Ultra HD Blu-ray with HDR10 and DCI-P3 color, when you compare those two things, you'll notice that in the HDR version with the DCI-P3 color, you can clearly see that the headlamps are blue. They have a blue tint to them. On the Blu-ray, they just look white.
Right.
They just plain look white. And if you were to watch it in HDR, but in Rec. 709 color, the orange of their spacesuits doesn't look as orange. You still notice that it's orange, but it's not the same deeper shade of orange that you see with the DCI-P3 color, and you lose a bit of that blue in their headlamps. So it's a fairly easy thing to spot. You're like, wait a second, those look like real lamps, and they got a blue tinge to them, and they don't in the other versions.
Right.
And then you've got to get yourself Blade Runner, because that's like a fantastic looking HDR transfer that they've done on that thing. And there, the neon, because there's plenty of neon in Blade Runner, actually looks like neon lights now, instead of just looking like a kind of flat, shade of green and yellow and pink and red like it does on the Blu-ray. Same thing when you switch between DCI-P3 color and Rec. 709 color. In DCI-P3, in HDR, it's like, that looks like neon, perhaps for the first time that we've seen this movie really looking like actual real live neon lights. So those would be examples I'd point to.
There you go. Vincent Tio put out an interesting YouTube video after his discussions with various manufacturers and reps from the Blu-ray Disc Association at IFA. They were saying how Dolby Vision HDR10 Plus are not in a format war, although Vincent himself doesn't necessarily agree. What do we think?
Yeah.
I think they are trying. They're very much trying to be in the format war. They're pushing it. I don't know that anybody's going to care enough to. Okay. Let me put it to you. Let me give you a concrete example of what I'm talking about. So I am not at home, and my house gets power. My friend's house does not. He's been here plenty, right? So I've got my subwoofers in the bathroom. You guys saw the pictures on Facebook. I took both of my subwoofers and I wedged them into the cubby hole of this little sink. It was sitting on top of a sink up there. And so they were like the highest thing in my house, pretty much. So I was like, my subwoofers are going to make it. They got to make it. Even though I'm sure SVS would send me some more if I asked them to, but still, I didn't want to have to ask. So, and my speakers were, put up high and everything else. And, I took all the stuff off the ground. So he calls me and says, so the home theater seems to be working, but I can't really hear anything. I'm like, did you hook up the speakers? He goes, no, they were on the chairs. I just moved them off. I'm like, okay. Gonna have to do a little bit more than that. So I explained to him what he needed to do and all of that. And so all he's got to do is plug in the inputs from the speaker lines and then plug in the subwoofers. It's not really that big of a deal. I get here, turn it on. I'm like, When the speakers are out of phase. Now, this guy's
Mm.
watched like at least three movies that I know of in this house, in this theater, after doing this with one of the speakers out of phase. I mean, so obviously out of phase that I had to stop and start figuring out which of the speakers was out of it. Now I still have to rerun Odyssey and all that because all the speakers have changed positions, and I don't know if you put the right subwoofer in the right spot. So the volume dials in the back might be a little bit messed up. So I got to rerun all of that anyways. I'm gonna do that, but I couldn't believe that he could not notice that
Right.
something
Which,
sounded weird.
by the way, is just connecting the red binding post of the receiver to the black binding post of the speaker, and the black binding post of the receiver to the red binding post of the speaker. That's all that went on there in terms of wiring out of phase.
In all honesty, it's not really his fault because I've got like some speaker wire that's like blue on one side and black on the other, and red on one, red on the other, black on the other, and they should be, but for whatever reason they're not. I don't know. They're kind of, some of them are kind of reversed, and I don't know why they are. So that's just my own fault for being lazy when I was wiring them or not being able to see very well behind there. When I get the new receiver, which we'll be talking about later, I will endeavor to make things make a little bit more sense in the back of my receiver. So to think that HDR10 and Dolby Vision is going to be some sort of format war like Blu-ray and HD DVD was, I think it's ludicrous. I don't think anybody's going to care enough. They're going to be like, is it, HDR10 is mandated, so I will get high dynamic range in some fashion.
Right. That was exactly their point.
All the rest of it's just going to be like, I don't care.
Yeah, their point was this isn't a format war because, okay, so a format war was Betamax versus VHS, sure, or Blu-ray versus HD DVD, because if you bought a Blu-ray and put it in an HD DVD player, you got nothing. It didn't work. If you bought an HD DVD and put it in a Blu-ray player, you got nothing. It didn't work. They're saying if you buy a disc that has Dolby Vision on it and you put it in a player that doesn't play Dolby Vision, it only plays HDR10 plus, you won't get HDR10 plus, you won't get Dolby Vision, but you will get HDR10. You'll still get an image, it'll still be a high dynamic range, it'll just be static metadata instead of dynamic metadata, and vice versa. You buy a disc that has HDR10 plus, you put it in a player. Yeah, you put it in a player that can do Dolby Vision but not HDR10 plus. You won't get Dolby Vision, you won't get HDR10 plus, but you'll still get HDR10. You'll still get HDR, just be static metadata. So they're saying at least there's this common denominator. In all cases, you'll get HDR10 at a minimum, and then beyond that, you might get Dolby Vision or HDR10 plus. Now, it's a tiny bit of a format war in the sense, in my view, in the sense that if you buy a Samsung TV, you can't watch any Dolby Vision content on it. And there are some movies in the streaming services that don't, if you don't have Dolby Vision, it goes to 4K, no HDR at all. That does exist in a handful of the movies that are out there on a couple of the streaming services. So in that case, it's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if my TV just supported all the HDR formats so I don't have to even care about this stupidity? Right? So in that sense, I'm like, I think it's dumb. I don't, like, why even do this? But
I don't think anybody, I honestly don't think anybody's going to care.
There's a ton of people who will never notice the difference between HDR and SDR. Like, there are a ton of people who just want everything to look eye-searingly bright all the time, and they actually don't like HDR in any form because that tends to make most of the movie look darker.
Right.
Because they're used to dynamic vivid mode on standard dynamic range content that was peaking out at 400 nits and the black level was raised to 50. And they're like, that looks great. Look at how, look, I have to put sunglasses on to watch it. It's fantastic. And then they put in a Dolby Vision disc where everything is set to where it should be. And they're like, I can't see anything. Everything's all dark all the time. HDR is terrible. So that's going to be a lot of people. They certainly aren't going to care about Dolby Vision versus HDR10 plus.
Not a format war, I think, is what it ends up being. So, lastly, Infinite Gary says, some displays offer lookup tables with some projectors even offering a different presets for certain types of screens. What are lookup tables all about, and what adjustments would be made for different projector screens? Well, a lookup table is kind of a database term, basically. And what it is a preset settings that are set in in the memory of your storage of your device, whatever it is. And whenever you say vivid mode, it says, okay, vivid mode is all of these things. That's a lookup table. It's like brightness here, contrast here, colors here, this, there's the gamma, all of that. And then for these, what we're talking about projections, what you're talking about is for a certain type of screen, they know there's going to be this type of color shift. Like, so do you have a gray screen? Okay. Well, that tells us a certain number of things that we need to do to make the projector look better so that you don't call us and bug us about why it looks bad. Okay.
Yeah, in displays, the lookup tables are typically specifically about color.
Mhm.
And so you'll notice in a lot of like consumer displays, you might have a color management system, and maybe it'll be a 2-point grayscale adjustment or a 10 or a 20-point grayscale adjustment. And that's saying when you get that percentage stimulus, do this to the colors. Bump up the red a little bit, knock down the blue a little bit, but you're only doing that in 2 or 10 or 20 places. A lookup table gives you the ability to adjust how much color each of the primary colors, red, green, and blue, you're getting for every single value. So in a 10-bit video signal, there are 1,024 values for red, green, and blue. And a lookup table lets you say exactly how much red, green, and blue you should get for every single one of those 1,024 values. So it's super, super detailed for the color. And what you would get if there's presets for certain screens is saying, we know this screen has a certain amount of color shift. When you put this much blue on the screen, you get this much blue back. Maybe a little bit too much or not quite enough. So we know we have to boost or cut the amount of blue. As an example, red, green, same thing. There's a little bit of color shift on that screen. We know that. That's a known thing. So we can adjust that in the lookup table. That's what's going on there.
All right, Mark. Mark has RBH Impression Series tower speakers. And are we calling that? It's not EMP Tech anymore?
No, the EMP Tech is gone. It's okay, RBH now. Yeah.
And a single SVS PB2000 subwoofer. Okay, so he's got. These were our recommendations, and so far he's enjoying them. He wants to add a second subwoofer, but he's thinking he'd prefer the looks of the matching Impression Series subwoofer up front. He doesn't want to give up any performance, but the RBH I-12E would look better up front, while his SVS PB2000 could live at the back of the room. They're the same price, basically, and the specs look quite similar. So do we think there's any reason the RBH I-12E wouldn't be up to snuff? How big is his room?
I don't know.
See, because this the review of this was actually pretty flattering. You want to plug one port in order to get the maximum extension out of it and control some stuff that goes on in the low end below 20 hertz.
Yeah, it does have 3 ports, and those come with plugs that are optional, so you can...
You're going to want to plug one of those things for sure, and that'll get you the maximum extension at about 18 hertz in room, maybe a little bit lower, depending on the size of your room. But the big problem was that the amplifier is not big enough. Or at least there's a limiter on it that's stopping.
Are you sure that wasn't the I-12?
That's what he's asking for.
No, this is the I-12E that has a beefed up amplifier.
Well, then that's going to be if that's the case, let me click on this thing now.
Yeah.
Because I just searched for it myself. And
yeah, very confusing, but there is an I-12 and an I-12E. He's talking about the I-12E, which is $800, and it's got the beefed up 500 watt amp, which is the same wattage rating as his PB2000.
All right. Well, then, it seems like this is a pretty decent little subwoofer, so I don't see any problems with it.
Specs wise, it's very comparable to the PB2000. So if you're finding that right now in your room size, the PB2000 is providing sufficient output, right? You're saying, I'd like to get the 2 subs so I can have more uniform bass, maybe knock out a null or something that might be happening in one of my seats, but output wise, my PB2000 is fine, then that RBH I-12E should be very comparable. Like I say, same driver size, very similar cabinet size, similar port area. The PB2000 has 1 large port. This one has 3 smaller ports with the option to plug 1 or all 3 of them. But very comparable specs-wise, extension, power, all that. So I don't foresee a problem pairing that with a PB2000 at all.
They seem to be out of stock.
They do.
Like all of them.
Yeah,
all of the speakers are out of stock. So
that was the case with the Impression Series at the moment. They're waiting for another boat shipment, as far as I can tell.
Well, they're saying that for the next generation, stay tuned for the next generation coming soon. So I don't know what that means. Well, they changing this at all. All right, so I guess I had read the review of the 12 instead of the 12E. So if they upgraded that amp, then yeah, I don't see any problems with it whatsoever. Michael. First up, one of our older podcasts helped Michael resolve an audio issue. He has a Mac Mini and a Roku 2 as his source is connected to a Yamaha RX V675 AV receiver. He was finding that he wasn't able to use Dolby Pro Logic 2 or DTS Neo 6 up mixing when using his Mac Mini. He heard us discussing that same issue with another listener, and sure enough, his audio output on his Mac was set to 8-channel PCM, meaning that the Mac Mini was doing all the audio decoding and always sending 7.1 PCM signals to his Yamaha, even when it was only a 2-channel source, which means you'll get 2 channels and nothing else, no matter what you do.
Right. Yeah, all the other channels are technically active, but they're just playing silence.
Yeah. He switched the speaker configuration of the Mac Mini to a 2-channel enabled bitstream output, and now everything is working fine on that front. So here's the question. He's building up his audio system a little at a time. He started with a monoprice 5.1 speaker package. His first big speaker upgrade has been a pair of ELAC debut B6 bookshelf speakers for his front left and right positions. He reran YPOW after installing the new speakers, but he'd like us to double check his AV receiver settings for him. What should be on, what should be off, and what should be manually changed. So we're going to have to go through this because when I did the review of these questions today, I did it on my phone and I could not zoom into these things.
Sorry.
And so I don't know what you're showing people, so let's go from what I'm seeing.
Should be seeing the same things we're looking at in our notes.
So the manual setup, it says power amp assigned. It says basic 7-channel plus zone 1, 5-channel bi-amp. It looks like that's fine.
Those are the options. Yeah, so basic is all he got. He doesn't have extra channels. Now, this does have an interesting thing on the back. There are 9 sets of binding posts, but there are only 7 amps. So it has the ability to, on the fly, switch between either surround backs or front presence speakers.
Right.
But he's just running 5.1 anyway. So all of that's kind of moot. Basic's all you need as far as your power amp assigned.
All right, then the next one, we've got his configuration for his speakers. He's got everything set to small, so that's good.
Yes, that's exactly what it should be.
The next one, we have the distance level. The distances here, the speakers are about 5 to 7 feet apart away from him.
Yeah, it looks like he's shifted a little bit to the right, or, has the things on the left a little bit farther away from him. But YPOW should do a very accurate job of that sort of thing, so I have no worries there.
And that 8.4 feet for your subwoofer doesn't mean anything, so don't worry about that. Did I skip the distances? I didn't. No. Yes. Okay. No, we're on to levels, and again, everything looks pretty good here. They're all within like a dB of each other, so that's fine. Going to the parametric EQ, he's got the YPOW set to flat, which I would that'd be where I'd start. If there's other options, you can try them, but I would start with flat and probably get bored and stop.
I completely agree with that. Now, the one that wasn't shown in here in his manual speaker setup was the crossover setting. This is a global crossover in the 675, so you get 1 hertz value that gets assigned to all speakers that you set to small. So all 5 speakers in your case will have the same crossover. Now, you said you started with that monoprice package, so there's a chance that it might need to be set higher than 80. 80 is the default. There's a chance that setting it higher than that might be beneficial to you. So
for the ELAC, you mean?
No, because but only his front pair. So the center and the surrounds are still the monoprice speakers. So it might not be a terrible idea. I mean, see what YPOW set. If YPOW set it to lower than 80, definitely raise it to at least 80.
Yes.
But raising it to 100 or 120 might not be the worst thing, but 80 is probably fine.
Okay. This next one just says lip sync. Not really sure what we're supposed to see.
Yeah, so he's into the sound menus now. The lip sync should just be left at auto. Now, the dynamic range, definitely leave it at maximum. That's the default anyway. That means you're not compressing the dynamic range in any way. Max volume, set that wherever you like, wherever you don't want it to be higher. Initial volume is fine to leave it at that. Now, the adaptive DSP level probably doesn't matter because that only applies to Yamaha's DSP listening modes. So if you use that whatever. I don't even know what effect that's going to have. It's based on the volume level. It changes some of the DSP processing, but you're probably not even using any of those cinema DSP listening modes anyway, so that setting won't matter.
Yeah. Under video, in this video mode, he has direct, so that's just should be passing everything through, which should be fine.
That's exactly what I would do.
HDMI, he's got HDMI control off. Thank you. He's got the standby through off because it won't go on unless you turn HDMI control.
No, standby through can go.
Oh,
without
I was thinking ARC. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. ARC. Standby through is fine. If you want to be able to listen to stuff through your TV with your receiver being off and all your speakers being off, then you would want to turn that on.
Yeah.
All that means is the last source, usually the way this works,
Mm-hmm.
the last source that you were watching, you can turn your TV on and it will
use your TV's built-in speakers. Yeah, that's what the standby through is for. Yes, HDMI control, that is the big one you need to have turned on. That's the stupid CEC stuff.
So audio output, he's got the amp on and the HDMI out TV on. I don't see any reason to have the HDMI TV on unless you're using those speakers, which I don't suggest you do. So,
and that would be weird because that would be your 5.1 is playing and your TV speakers are playing at the same time, which would be a weird. I don't even know why this is an option. That's unusual to see that. Yeah, I would probably there's no situation in which you are using your 5.1 speakers and your TV's built-in speakers simultaneously.
You don't know some old people. My parents would totally do that.
I know, but you shouldn't be. So that HDMI out to the TV, turn that off. Leave the amp on, turn the HDMI out to the TV off. That doesn't make sense.
So this next one is option. It says treble and bass. It just says bypass. I guess the option is to make some adjustments to your treble and your bass. You could if you want to, but bypass is fine.
Mm-hmm.
The adaptive DRC.
That's dynamic range control.
Is that going to be close to our Odyssey dynamic EQ?
No, it's a little bit more like dynamic volume.
Yeah.
Which is as you turn the master volume down, it tries to compress all of the dynamic range so that you don't have as large a difference between the quietest thing and the loudest thing. Now, you might like that. There's a chance. Some people do like that when they're watching at night. They turn the master volume down, and then they're like, now the dialogue's too quiet and the explosions are too loud. So that's what the adaptive DRC is there for. When you put the master volume at 0, it's not doing anything. It's leaving the signal alone. But when you turn the volume down, it shrinks the dynamic range so that quieter things are a little bit louder and louder things are a little bit quieter. I'm not completely opposed to using that if that's something you want, but in general, we'd leave it off.
I use it for naps.
Sure.
When I want to take a nap and I don't want to be woken up by something. Next one is XD. Is that XT?
It's extended surround, and this is a bit of an odd setting. So if you have 7 speakers connected,
right,
this is, you can say when 2-channel or 5.1 channel comes in, always apply the Dolby Pro Logic 2 movie upmixer to it, or the DTS Neo 6 upmixer to it. You get to select which upmixer you want applied at all times. Auto just says if it's a Dolby signal, I'm going to apply Dolby Pro Logic 2 to it. If it's a DTS signal, I'm going to apply DTS Neo 6 to it. To me, well, in your case, it doesn't even matter because you don't have 7 speakers connected. So,
well, I mean, I guess it could theoretically matter for 5 speakers with a 2-channel input, though, right?
Right, yeah, 2-channel up mixed, yeah. So if you always want to use Dolby Pro Logic 2 in the movie or music mode, you could set that, but auto is probably just fine.
Input trim and subwoofer trim are both set to 0 for the Mac Mini, and that's just fine.
Yep.
I mean, you don't want to be adjusting anything there. Again, he's got an enhancer for that Mac Mini input, and that's set to off.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's supposed to make like really bad quality MP3s sound not quite as bad. I've never had much success with that. So
they just kind of make them sound bassier, a little louder, a little bit. They don't really do much. All right,
that's it.
Good luck with that, dude. Dylan says he doesn't have a ton of cash to drop on a new TV, but he'd like to jump into the HDR scene. He found a deal on the Vizio M55D series. Okay, so M55D. This is the current 2017 models end with an E, so this would be a 2016 model, the ones that came with the tablet, for $450. Is that a good deal? Is that a good TV that would be worthwhile for HDR content? I thought the M series were getting up updated, weren't they, for HDR and all that stuff for the M
Oh,
series?
the 2016s
Yeah.
already supported HDR10 and Dolby Vision.
I 100% I think that this, I don't know if 450 is a good price. It sounds like a good price for a
I think so.
55 inch thing. So yeah, right now there's no reason to buy a 2017 model because the 2016 models, they will send you a free remote and you get a tablet out of it, and they haven't really changed anything. So
yeah. The 2017s in the M series technically did get a little bit brighter for HDR, like 100 nits brighter. So it's not that there's zero difference, but it's $700 for the 55 inch with the E on the end for 2017. $700 for the 55 inch TCL P607, which to me is like the value choice. You can usually find that one for $650. So $450, undercutting both of those choices by at least $200. Still a really good TV. You're getting a free tablet out of the thing too.
that's right.
I say go for it, absolutely. At 55 inches, as long as that's the size you want, this is a great deal in my opinion.
It's an Android tablet. I guarantee you can download games on it because that's what my friend's kid did.
For sure.
There you go. Mark is the guy who had the Skylight Theater that he considered turning into a bass trap a while back. He's moved into a new house, so now he's got no skylight. But he still has a lot of the same gear. He's got a Denon AVR 4520, SVS Prime bookshelf speakers for LCR, and dual SB 2000 subs. He's added a pair of SVS Prime satellite speakers as surround, and he bought the JVC X500 projector that we previously talked about. He's using a 120-inch silver ticket screen with Velcro masking that made himself so he can have the 3 screen sizes he wanted, and he sits 10.5 feet away. That's all working very nicely. His new room is 15 feet square. It's 15 feet square. Okay. Okay. The ceiling is sloped, so it's 8 feet 4 inches at the front where the screen is, and 7 feet at the back behind the seats. There's a pocket door on the left that leads to a bathroom, a regular door on the right that goes to the hallway, and a small walk-in closet on the left at the back of the room. There's also a beam running from left to right just in front of his seats overhead. It's a 6-inch square. Everything's square in this room, and his split air conditioning unit is mounted up pretty high. High, pretty much directly to the right of his seats. So we'll be seeing some pictures here. Looks like he's got in the front left corner there. He's got a subwoofer with a panel on top of it.
Yep.
Straddling the corner, he's got his front speakers to the sides and below his screen, which I guess that's the masking.
That's the masking that he made himself. Is pretty cool. I like that.
It's pretty cool. And he's got another tri-trap, it looks like, in the right corner there.
Yeah, he hasn't like mounted anything to this new room yet, so everything's just kind of on the floor, sitting on top of the sub, that type of stuff. That's not the permanent arrangement for anyone who might be wondering.
Looks like on the right wall there, he's got where he's going to put his panels up. He's got this AC unit that's kind of hanging down. I had one like that. Those are pretty nice. He's got a nice little shelf for his projector in the back. Again, he's got some panel. It's got a panel back there, but nothing directly behind the couch, it looks like. There's some room between the back of the couch and the wall where there is also a shelving unit back there, but it's probably the same height or lower than the couch. On the left side, we can see the walk-in closet with the glass or the mirrored doors. And is that the gear in there?
That's his AV receiver and his source in there, so it's in the closet.
Okay. Don't leave him in there too long. All right. Surround speakers. Directly to the left is the closet door with the sliding mirrors. Directly to his right is the air conditioning unit. He could mount a speaker above the closet door and below the air conditioning unit. There's really no way to mount them both at the same height. For the moment, he's settled on putting the 2 surround speakers in the 2 rear corners. Do we see better positioning options, or should he go for the mismatched heights so the speakers can be directly to his size?
I like where they are now, to be honest.
Okay. Stands are an option that you have not considered. But if I don't think, like, usually I'd be like, I'll just put them wherever and they'll be fine. But this is really different. Like one's going to be very low and one's going to be very high. Not very low, but
Yeah.
considerably lower. I mean, lower enough that I think that you're going to notice.
I mean, there
So
is enough room you could actually have them like in front of the seats, like not drastically in front, but just in front of the closet door, in front of the air.
I don't approve of that.
Neither do, which is why I'm kind of like, I think you actually picked a pretty good spot right
if
now.
you can't put them on stands to the sides of your couch, then I think that this is the next best option.
Yeah.
So what about surround back speakers? Should he add them? He just put them on the low bookshelf that's behind the seats. He already has a pair of old JBL speakers that he could use. Okay, so you've already got speakers, and you're asking us if you could put them back there. We're not the boss of you. You can do what you want. So I would try it out. I don't think you're going to find much benefit. They're going to be too close to your other speakers. When I had speakers that close to each other from the surround backs to the side, especially since you have them right there in those corners, I found that they were the surround backs actually sort of messed up the surround experience for me. So I found that was detrimental. But you've got the speakers. We're talking like, $10 of speaker wire, just to test it out.
Yeah.
You've
Plus, your
probably already got
equipment is
that one.
closer to the back of the room anyway. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I would try it.
yeah, temporarily. Yeah, to me, absolutely, it's an experiment to run. I wouldn't anticipate surround backs being hugely beneficial in this setup. I agree they might actually be slightly detrimental. They're pretty close to the back of your seats there. Yeah, and your surround speakers are already behind your seating position. So I wouldn't anticipate a huge benefit, but why not give it a try? It's not going to hurt anything to do it temporarily.
Yeah. So since the room is pretty much a perfect square, he's been leaving the closet door open. He's able to keep his gear in there, so that's nice. But he's wondering if he should put a whole bunch of insulation in there and basically turn into a gigantic bass trap. Would that be worthwhile? This dude loves to shove insulation in things.
He likes the idea of a big bass trap somewhere.
There's no reason. Okay, first of all, I would, not only would I, but I did when I had doors in my home theater. First of all, how are these doors not shaking and bugging you? Because they should be. If not, then what are your subwoofers doing that is just so wrong? Because they should be able to rock this place, and those doors should shake and rattle and be irritating. I would take the doors off and put them in storage someplace. And then, yeah, why not? I would. You do seem to have some closets here, so maybe you can't do that, and that's fine too. But if it's going to be nothing but AV gear in there, take the doors off, put up some curtains over this thing, some nice whatever curtains, and so that you can close the thing off. And then, sure, why not throw some bass trapping in there? I've got a tri-trap in my little closet. It's just sitting back there because where else is it going to be? I had no other corners for it, so I put it back there. And I see no reason why you can't do that.
Yeah, similar to the stairwell earlier, sound is going to be bouncing around in there.
Yeah.
So if you can just knock down that bouncing around by putting some insulation in there, and it doesn't have to look pretty, if you put a little curtain up just to cover the opening, that's acoustically transparent but visually opaque. Yeah, I'd absolutely I mean, you don't have to fill the thing with insulation. Let's not go absolutely insane. But yeah, just some loose insulation in that closet for sure.
Yeah. So he already has 7 absorption panels. They're all 2 foot by 4 foot and 2 inches thick. He made them himself, and he's happy to make more, including thicker ones for better bass trapping. He's trying to figure out the best places to put them, though. He isn't opposed to putting panels on the ceiling. He'd be fine with straddling in the corners, too. One catches that the pocket door to the bathroom and the regular door to the hallway are basically right at the first reflection points. He could mount a panel on the regular door, but the pocket door is a challenge. Would it be bad to have absorption on one side and not the other? What are our overall suggestions for panel placement? Well, first of all, as we look around this room, we can already kind of see your panel placement, and with the only exception being that you don't have one right in that space between the 2 windows behind your head, where I think you could maybe put one back there. I think your panel placement looks pretty dang good, dude. I would definitely. I mean, the more corners you can straddle, the better off you'd be. Now, what you're talking about here is these first reflection points is an issue. I would not do one and not the other. And if there's no reason you can't do both, and you do both by having your panels movable and on a stand of some sort.
Right, freestanding.
And by doing that, you're going to have this room's going to be, I don't think you need that really add that much more, especially if you put like a big old giant bass trap in that closet there.
Yeah, once again, you don't want to go much beyond 30 to 40% of the total surface area covered in absorption. It starts to sound too dead if you go beyond that.
Yeah. So he has a UMic 1 calibrated from Cross Spectrum Labs. Yeah.
Just on the tip there for absorption panels. I was going to say if you don't want to do the freestanding panels in front of the doors, because that could be a hassle if you're going to the, making frequent use of the washroom or something, having to move a panel out of the way every time is a bit of a headache. So in lieu of that, you might try just putting panels on the ceiling at the first reflection point. Knock those down, because you do get first reflection from ceiling, floor, and the two sidewalls. So if the two sidewalls aren't covered, you could try on the ceiling at the first reflection point there. That could be an alternative.
I think you got plenty of absorption in here, but
yeah.
Either way, I'm not super worried about it, but yeah, you could try that. So lastly, he has a UMic 1 calibrated from Cross Spectrum Labs, which we approve of, and Room EQ Wizard, which was free, and we also approve of that. How can he use these tools to help him optimize his panel placement? He wants to figure out what size, thickness, and placement he needs. So how can measurements help him determine what to build and where to put them? Unfortunately, your room dimensions and what's going on in your room is more going to dictate where you can put stuff, as you're clearly seeing. You want about, and I don't know that you need to use a Room EQ Wizard in the UMic 1 to measure. What you can do is you can take everything out or most of it out, measure a room, put some stuff in, measure a room again, and see how much better it got.
Yeah, and what you want to be looking at are the waterfall plots, which is showing the decay times in your room.
Yeah.
And what you're hoping to find is you should have longer decay times in the base. I mean, It just takes longer for the sound wave to even form, right? It takes a 20th of a second for a 20 hertz wave to form, as opposed to a 20,000th of a second for a 20 kilohertz wave to form. So naturally, the decay time in the deep bass is going to be longer than in the treble. But what you should see is a pretty smooth line that has longer decay times in the bass and gradually gets shorter and shorter and shorter. What you don't want to see is some big elbow in the decay times, because you can get to a point where, like I was saying, if you overdamp the room, you have decay times that are normal looking in the bass, and then there's this elbow where you have like no decay times in the treble at all. It should be a pretty smooth looking graph. So Tom's idea of little by little bringing more absorption panels into the room and looking at the waterfall plots is a good way to see that. You can be like, hey, this is getting better and better. It's getting smoother and smoother, more and more gradual, rather than having lots of jagged, some things that are resonating longer than they should be, or a line that stays pretty flat or even goes up in the treble. You don't want that. So yeah, as you can see this smooth graph in the decay times forming, that's what you're aiming for.
All right, Tim's theater area is 18 by 22, but it's an open floor plan with 10-foot openings on the right to the kitchen and dining area. The living room theater area is carpeted, but the kitchen and dining room are hardwood. There are windows on the left and the fireplace at the front on the right. So at the moment, he's using a single SVS PB1000, which is obviously probably inadequate for this room. Even though it's a small sub for his volume of air, it's making things rattle. The windows only rattle occasionally at very certain frequencies, so not really a problem, but the fireplace rattles all the time, as does a picture frame that's mounted on the right side wall. He had some cheap foam bass traps that he tried putting in the corners near the fireplace in that picture, but didn't do anything as far as the rattles go. And aesthetics limit what he can do in terms of adding more room treatment. So what can he do that will actually alleviate these rattling problems? Dude, you could put all of the insulation in the world in this room and it's not going to stop those rattles. Okay, that's not
it's not the sound waves moving through the air that are rattling that picture and that fireplace. Well, I mean,
it is literally the sound waves moving through the air. It's just the frequencies. It is like a sympathetic vibration.
But if it's rattling all the time, it's also probably something else I'm going to mention in a moment. So
right, which is going to be structural. But so I mean, what you're going to have to do with the picture on the wall, most likely, you're going to need to find out how it's rattling and then damp that part. Meaning you're going to put something sticky or rubbery there to stop the noise from happening. And you're not going to stop it from rattling. You're going to stop it from making noise.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The
Yeah, the
rattling's
picture
going to
frame
happen.
should be very solvable. Some blue tack, sometimes called museum putty or plumber's tape, like Tom likes to recommend, which is, just rubbery, foamy tape that is, squishy.
Yep.
So, yeah, just putting some kind of squishy thing behind the picture frame is how to solve that one.
Now, the fireplace rattling all the time is probably structural. So if you do not have your it depends on what part's rattling too. It could be he has like a metal grate in front of it that's rattling, in which case it's not structural, but or maybe not solely structural. But if there's something in there that's rattling, which could be like the flue, or whatever, the little chain that's hanging down there, in which case you're going to want to damp the connection between your subwoofer and the floor. So, get yourself one of the, some of the SVS sound path isolation feet.
I mean, I do the cheap and free experiment before even doing that, which is fold up a big thick blanket.
Yep.
Put it under your sub. If your sub has feet on it, just turn your sub sideways, lay it on its side. It'll still play exactly the same. So that's the cheap and free experiment that you can do to see if decoupling your sub from the floor will be effective. Because it might be, but it also might not. But that's certainly worth the experiment to try out.
Right. That's, yeah.
And if it is effective, then you get something that looks prettier.
Yeah, that's right. But if it's not that, that doesn't seem to help, then you're going to have to track down once again what is actually rattling and try to stop it from doing so, because it's not going to stop moving. You got to stop it from making noise. So you need to figure out what that is.
Yeah.
But it's probably structural. If it's rattling all the time at all the frequencies.
At all the frequencies, yeah. Yeah, like the windows are 100% resonant frequency of the window. Right. And you can, again, you can damp the window as much as possible.
Good luck.
But
good luck with that.
I mean, they're at those frequencies, they're going to resonate. When those frequencies plays, those windows are going to resonate. But like you said, it's very occasional and not really a problem. These other things are rattling all the time. That makes me think it's structural. But yeah, so getting the subwoofer decoupled, experiment. If that helps, great. And then other than that, you have to damp the rattling things themselves. No amount of absorption panels are going to help you here. That isn't the cause of this.
No. So he'd love to upgrade to a larger 15-inch subwoofer, but is he correct that a higher output sub will probably make his rattling issues even worse? Only if you turn that subwoofer louder than your current subwoofer is. They're not going to. I mean, you could find new things that rattle.
Yeah.
But they're rattling at frequencies that just weren't being excited by this other subwoofer. So I don't understand why 15 inches is specifically what he's looking for, but I guess there's maybe one out there that he wants. But, if you have a 15-inch driver in a subwoofer box and you put a 40-watt amp with it, you won't be rattling nothing. You won't even rattle the sub, which will be trying to make movement, and instead will just be killing your little 40-watt amp. So just having the 15-inch driver is not going to do much. But if you don't turn it up any louder, it shouldn't rattle it anymore. But
if it is structural and the new one is like more stable or has better damped feet already built in, it might actually be better than the current situation.
Yeah, and if you've got spikes on your subwoofer,
well, it's a PB1000, so I don't think that comes with spikes. It should be just the flat feet.
Right. But in general, if you've got spikes in your subwoofer and you're listening to this podcast, you should take them off right now and go put something rubber on them. Just in general. His current AV receiver has obviously multi-Q XT. Would upgrading to a model with multi-Q XT32 and sub-EQ HT help as far as the rattles go? Nope.
The Odyssey LFC, low frequency containment.
That might.
But all that does is attenuate the bass. All it does is turn it down.
You could do that yourself.
You could do that yourself. So, and you already know that turning it down eventually will stop it happening. So, electronic equalization of the bass is not really going to solve this issue for you, unfortunately.
So his current receiver can't pass through HDR of any kind. He uses his NVIDIA Shield a lot, and it can send HDR10 as well as lossless audio. So if he connects the Shield to his AV receiver, he loses HDR. If he connects it directly to his TV, he loses the lossless audio. Clearly, a new receiver could solve this problem, but that's a big expenditure. And unless you can justify it with a higher level of Odyssey being super worthwhile, i.e., it would fix this rattling problem. Sorry,
Which it
dude.
won't.
It's going to be a tough sell. Sorry, dude. He's thinking about buying an Oppo Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Those have an HDMI input and 2 HDMI outputs. Could he plug his NVIDIA Shield into the Oppo and then use the Oppo's 2 HDMI outputs to send HDR video to his TV and lossless audio to his existing receiver that way?
Nope.
Okay, let me answer the question before you answer the question.
Sorry.
The disc that you put into the Oppo will send HDR and everything to the projector or whatever, display, and the lossless audio. But when you plug something into the back, I don't think it could pass through I don't even know if it does 4K, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't do HDR at all through the back one. Is that right?
You are correct.
Okay,
yes. Yeah, if you play an actual disc in the Oppo, what you want to do will work. But plugging the NVIDIA Shield into the Oppo's HDMI input, because it does have one, but plugging it into that won't let you do what you want to do. It will not pass HDR, so it's no better than your existing AV receiver. And I don't believe it even separates the audio and video when you're using the HDMI input. That is not the solution. Now, that is a $550 Blu-ray player.
You can get a new receiver for $550.
You sure can. Now, I don't know if you want to go to 9 or 11 speaker Atmos. I mean, hey, the X4300H is out there for $700, so that's accessories for less. That might be. But if you're going to stop at 7 speakers or 5 speakers, the X3300W is there for $500 at accessories for less. So if you were willing to spend $550 on a Blu-ray player, why not spend $500 on a new AV receiver that'll let you do what you want to do? Now, that would mean you then don't have that money available for the Oppo, but you could maybe get the LG, the UP970 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, which I will admit is not as fancy and nice. It's not as heavy. It doesn't feel as sturdy, but it still plays Dolby Vision. It's the only other one you can get right now that plays Dolby Vision right now. So you could save some money there, get yourself an X3300W. You'd barely be spending any more money, and you can do everything you want to do.
And the other options are going to be stopgap anyways. So if you were like, I really don't want to spend that much money right now, I don't want to get a new receiver right now, you're like, okay, well, you could get a Switch. You know, you could get one like HD Furies or one of those things that will split it out for you and do all that stuff.
Oh,
you're going to end up spending a bunch of money on that anyways. And it's going to be something you will not be able to use in the future once you upgrade your receiver, which you will inevitably do. So might as well just do the receiver or just wait until you're ready to do the receiver.
And if you decouple your sub and put some plumber's tape behind the picture and figure out what's rattling in the fireplace and put some plumber's tape on that stuff too, then you can tell whoever it is who's saying this is too much money to spend on a receiver that it was XT32 that did it. That'll be a lie, but you can sell it that way.
I don't understand how I get the kind of like, well, no, that's a good idea when I suggest something like that, but you suggested it sounds like, oh, well, it's pretty reasonable. He's Canadian. Brian's local AMC Cineplex was recently upgraded. Now they have Dolby Cinema. He went there with his wife and mother-in-law, and they were all blown away by the experience. I'm blown away that you went anywhere with your wife and your mother-in-law to a movie.
Some people get along.
How does that happen? Of course, my mother-in-law is currently deceased, so taking her to a movie would be extremely uncomfortable for everybody involved. The bass, in particular, was so tactile, kick you in the chest, and impressive that his wife agreed that she'd enjoy being able to replicate that experience in their home theater. Their room is 15 feet by 19 feet and 8 feet high, so it's about 2,300 cubic feet. What pair of subwoofers would we recommend? They've got to replicate that tactile bass they experience in the Dolby Cinema, so don't hold back. Okay, I want to say that it's very hard to replicate the actual experience of being in a cinema.
Just the sheer room size. Because
the room is so big and they have to move so much air to get that bass to you, you feel it in a visceral way that you won't feel it in your room because you don't have to move nearly as much air. While it's possible to have a subwoofer that will blow enough air at you that will shake your pant leg as it does in the theater in your home, your ears will not be able to take very much of that, and it'll be much too loud for the rest of the movie. So I want to make your expectations a little bit more realistic here. Are you going to get that deep bass? Can we get you there? Can we get you hearing what you hear there? And to a certain extent, feeling what you were feeling in the cinema? Yes. Are you going to have the exact same reaction? The answer is no, you will not. And it's simply because there isn't a wall of subwoofers. And that's literally what they have in many of these cinemas. Like behind the screens, the entire bottom of it is nothing but subwoofers pushing massive amounts of air into a humongous room, trying to pressurize that room and get it to the up to reference volume. That being said, couple PC 2000s, knock that right out, dude. You're gonna be crushing it in this room. 15 by 19, you are gonna be destroying it in that room.
Now, I did want to say, because this comes up frequently, people give us their room dimensions, but they have openings.
He did not say that he did not have openings.
He did not say, but he didn't explicitly say that he doesn't. So I just want to make sure, because if this is an enclosed room, right, this is a spare bedroom or something, and you can close the door and you don't have openings to the rest of the house, then yeah, you can pressurize that space. But if this is a living room and it's actually open to the kitchen and the dining room and stuff, and you only gave us the dimensions of the living room section,
yeah,
then that's a whole other story. You have to tell us the entire cubic volume of air. Maybe you already did, but just in case you didn't, I want to put that out there. But assuming that this is an enclosed room, it's got a door, you can close it. Yeah, PC 2000s, PB 2000s would totally get the job done. However, I want to point out there are some less expensive alternatives that will work just as well in this room size if it's enclosed. Outlaws Ultra X12, you can get duals of them for $1,200. So that's less than the, what is it, $1,400 for dual PC or PB 2000s from SVS.
Right.
So it's a little bit less there. Ultra X12s, duals of those from Outlaw would totally do this. And right now, HSU has their VTF2 Mark Vs on sale. So even though they charge shipping separately, you're looking at, what is it, $1,160, I think. So it's slightly less expensive than the Outlaws for a pair of VTF2 Mark Vs from HSU. So if you're very price conscious, any of those three will get the job done in 2,300 cubic feet.
Yeah. Make sure you build a box, though, if you're going to buy a box.
Yes. Yes. Build yourself a cardboard model. They're all big, and the cylinders have the smallest footprint. So,
all right, Richard. So we've recommended banana plugs in the past. We've also recommended several picks for products from the Wirecutter. They recently published their pick for best banana plugs. They went with some monoprice Affinity Series banana plugs that use screws to hold the speaker wire and traditional spring-type banana ends. They didn't include either of our current recommendations in their testing at all. No locking banana plugs of any kind, in fact. And they did include the Seal deadbolts that Rob recommended in the past, but not the strike model that Rob has been.
Why is it
so? It's just a stupid word. It's got too many E's that Rob has recommended lately. So what do we think of their pick and comments about the other banana plugs that they tried? Don't care. I mean, really, what it comes down to is that their pick is fine. And I actually used that. Their second pick I've used, and I flat out hate. Okay, their backup cheap one, it's basically got like a inside. Okay, what it's got is as you screw off the bottom, inside there's like a little wobbling piece of gold plated copper crap that kind of backs off. And you stick the wire in and you screw it in from the back side. You tighten it back up. I have had those things, and then the wire is kind of coming up at an angle into the, so it's perpendicular. It's going in perpendicular to the thing. I hate those. Those have loosened up on me, and the wire has fallen out more times than once. I would not recommend those at all. I mean, I know they're very easy to install and you'll need a tool, but dude, it's a screwdriver. It's not that hard. It's not brain surgery here. That is a terrible. That I do not agree with that one. But their other one was fine. I got no problems with the other one.
Yeah, a Wirecutter always includes value for money very highly in their pick. That's a big important thing because they're trying to hit the broadest mass appeal that they can. So if there's something that's very inexpensive that gets the job done nicely, that's the one they're going to go for.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, the pick that they chose, the Monoprice Affinity, I mean, the only reason I'm not a big fan of ones that hold the wire in with screws is that it just takes a little longer to do the installation. Now, if you're most people, you're going to do it once, so that's totally fine. The reason I like the Strike ones is because they're super fast to install. There's no screws or anything. You shove the speaker wire in there, you splay it a tiny bit, and then there's actually this big wedge of metal in the other side on the Sewell Strike ones. You just clamp it down and you're done. It's as fast as possible. The deadbolts, I didn't agree with their criticism of the deadbolts. I know exactly what happened there because they're like, if you have some really thick speaker wire, with the deadbolts, you unscrew them, you put the speaker wire up through the bottom, you splay it out at the top, and then when you tighten the part down, it bends the splayed out wire around the inner barrel and tightens down. Well, if you put a little bit too much length, it becomes very hard to screw in the top. You have to get just the right amount of length. If you do, it just folds over the top. As you splay it out, just folds over the top of the inner barrel, and it screws down just fine, however thick the speaker wire is. So
I feel like this conversation is getting us to the point where we might get an explicit rating on this one. This is a lot of talk of length
and splaying
and stuff.
It's all
visibly
clean,
uncomfortable over here.
Speaker wire.
I feel like this is a euphemism for something, Rob. I don't know why you had to bring your baggage onto this podcast, but okay, just the right length. Got it. You gotta know.
That's right.
Gotta know how to handle your wire is what you're saying. And if you don't know how to handle your wire just right, someone's gonna get hurt.
Don't want to splay too much of that length.
Don't oversplay. It's just wire splaying is what this is. It's like mansplaining, but it's wire splaining.
But I agree with Tom that locking banana plugs offer an entirely different feature that wasn't tested whatsoever in any of these. So I still like our picks. Now, they didn't even test either of our current picks, so how can they even say?
Yeah.
And
that's fine. You know what? There's a lot of them out there, and it's fine. I found the ones I liked that worked. Rob found the ones that worked for him, and these guys found the ones that they liked that worked for them.
Yep.
I'm okay with all of them. I'm not okay with that one.
Yeah, the cheap pick, I also, I wouldn't go. I've used those in the past. Not a fan.
Not a fan of those. But other than that, I'm okay. Wire splaining. Never going to be able to look at speaker wire the same again after this conversation. Rob over there. You just got to put the tip in. All right. Jim noticed that you can look at the results tab after running Odyssey, and it shows graphs for each of your speaker channels, but doesn't show a graph for the subwoofer output. Why not? Are you using multi-QXT? Because if you are, then it doesn't do anything to the subwoofer channel. So there's that.
No, that'd be 2EQ. 2EQ was the only one that didn't do anything.
Oh, it didn't do anything. I mean,
2EQ didn't touch the subwoofer channel at all. That, but everything above that does.
I didn't think XT did much of the subwoofer channel either.
No, XT does quite a bit. No, Multi-Q does the sub. Multi-Q XT added more filters to the bass section, and XT32 added more filters to everything. Those do the subs. I'm not 100% sure why not, but I suspect it's because people are going to look at the results and they're going to say, okay, I see a bunch of boosting and cutting in my speakers, and I pretty much only see cutting going on in my sub. Why are you making my sub quieter, Odyssey? Why would you do that?
I swore I didn't have a chance to look at it beforehand, but I swore I've seen graphs, but I guess I hadn't.
It's the speakers. Yeah, it shows you graphs for all the speakers. And he's right. It doesn't show you one for the sub, which does strike us a little bit odd. I do agree. But if I'm only guessing, maybe we should try and get in touch with Chris directly and get an answer. I'm not completely sure, but I would suspect it's because maybe too many people misread the graph.
Sure.
That happens. Man, does that happen. Also, the other thing I will say is that where that results is most useful is when you actually want to use the manual EQ. Because if you want to try to replicate or alter what Odyssey has done manually by using the manual EQ that's built in, they don't give you very many frequencies to choose from in the bass. So it's not going to be terribly useful. You can't replicate the results that Odyssey did in the subwoofer output in the deep bass with the manual EQ, whereas you can do a somewhat decent job of replicating what it did to the speaker EQ using the manual adjustments. So that might be part of it as well. That's another guess on my part.
Mitch says we have often said that people shouldn't angle their Atmos speakers, just point them straight down. Now, Dolby's own documentation says, quote, mounting considerations. If the chosen overhead speakers have a wide dispersion pattern, approximately 45 degrees from the acoustical reference axis over the audio band from 100 hertz to 10 kilohertz or wider, then speakers may be mounted facing directly downward. For speakers with narrower dispersion patterns, those with aimable or angled elements should be angled towards the primary listen position, end quote. So how would someone know whether their speakers meet these wide dispersion characteristics or not? Do most speakers have wide dispersion? Do most speakers have dispersions that wide? 45 degrees from the acoustic reference axis over the audio band, but from whatever to whatever.
From 100 to 10 kilohertz, so not all the way out to 20 kilohertz. That's an important detail as well.
Yeah, because once you get up that high, it starts beaming anyway. So
that's
you're
right.
have an awfully hard time doing that. I would say that most ceiling speakers that are designed for being in the ceiling, most ceiling speakers have wide dispersion because that's the whole idea of putting a speaker in the ceiling. You don't want to have narrow dispersion in the ceiling. You want to have wide dispersion.
Mm-hmm.
So by design, speaker designers are going. Now, if you take a speaker that was not designed for that sort of application, like a bookshelf or a satellite speaker, maybe you might not have that exact amount, but I would say, this is 45 degrees. That's not that far.
Right.
We're not talking like 60 degrees or 90 degrees off axis. We're talking 45 degrees. And are they talking about off axis or 45 degrees total? Because 45 degrees total, it's only half of that off axis.
I've heard 45 off axis. That's the way I've usually heard it described, meaning the total spread would be 90 degrees.
Yeah. I say that most speakers fall close enough to 40.
Oh, yeah.
To 45
most
degrees.
Traditional in-ceiling speakers certainly would.
Well, I'm saying most speakers, and even especially
most speakers in general.
Yeah, most speakers in general, and satellite speakers in general as well are going to fall into that because they're meant to have slightly wider dispersions. Now, you might find like a bookshelf speaker or something that is traditionally not used on the ceiling or as a surround. That one might not. But I would argue, who cares?
Well,
it's going to be close enough.
A good example of an actual in-ceiling speaker meant to go in-ceiling that has narrower dispersion than this would be Golden Ears, with their folded ribbon tweeters that are known to have narrower dispersion. And they've done the example, and they even made a model specifically that has an angle built into it so that you can put it in the ceiling flush, but the drivers are angled more towards the audience. They did that exactly for this reason, and Dolby mentioned this sort of thing exactly for that sort of speaker. If you know it has narrower dispersion, then yeah, go ahead and angle it towards the audience because you don't want terrible off-axis response reaching your audience. That's not the goal. But most speakers have pretty wide dispersion, especially when you're only talking between 100 to 10 kilohertz, not the full up to 20 kilohertz thing. So our advice still stands. Most of the time, just aim them straight down because most speakers do. Now, how could you tell? Pretty simple. Play the speaker, play pink noise, just the test tone that comes out of your AV receiver. Get up close to it, get yourself within a foot of that. So this could be before you install it in the ceiling or mount it on the ceiling. Get yourself up close to it and move yourself to either side and up and down. And you'll be able to hear when the treble really significantly rolls off.
Not talking about like, does it sound a little bit different?
No, not a little bit.
We're talking about like
significant.
It needs to sound really different. Yep. So, and you're going to find that's way further than 45 degrees.
You'll find a lot of speakers you can get 60, 70 degrees to either side before that really happens. So then they can do this 45 thing, no problem.
So he asked, what about in-ceiling versus on-ceiling and the difference in height that creates? If a speaker is lower and closer to the audience, wouldn't it benefit more from being angled. The dude wants to angle his speakers.
I know lots of people do. Lots of people just want to angle their
Yeah,
speakers,
you know
or
what,
they have
angling-
the aimable tweeter in the built-in thing, and they want to do it.
blanket statement. We give you permission to angle your speakers. Okay, feel free. You're gonna ruin it for everybody else in the room, but who cares? You want to angle your speakers, so that's fine. All right, but we're talking. I mean, how low are these things hanging? Are they like 1.5 feet off the ceiling? I mean, well then, yeah, maybe you have to have even wider than 45, but not by much.
Yeah, I mean, what Dolby's saying is take this 45, so straight down, there it is, and then 45 degrees in every direction from there.
Yeah.
If you're within the big fat cone that
Which
creates,
is very big and fat if you're on the ceiling. Even if you're mounted on the ceiling instead of in the ceiling, you're maybe an extra couple of inches down. How much difference do you think that makes? Not a lot.
Yeah. So as long as you're within the big fat cone, that's it. I mean, if angling it, you're still within the big fat cone, all of your seats, then great. Go ahead and angle it. Just try to stay within the big fat cone.
All right, how many more questions do we have?
Goes up to 16, but some of these are short, so whatever you want to do.
I want to go to sleep. I am exhausted, but we will do maybe one or two more, and then we are
I think
out.
that's done. Yeah.
Jason. Jason's room is small. He says 15 by 14 by 8. Doesn't say if there's any doors.
Openings, I know.
Yeah, he is running a 5.1 system. What type of surrounds would we recommend? Bipole, dipole, or monopole? Not dipole. I would monopole or dipole. I'm sorry, bipole would be the two we'd recommend in general.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, my recommendation more often leans towards monopole because later on, if you decide to go with Atmos, you're going to end up with some bipole speakers that aren't optimal for Atmos. So monopole. That's
it's easier. It'll work just fine for whatever you want to do. If you get different speakers in the future and you want to move things around, monopoles work in any position. And show me a speaker brand that doesn't make a monopole bookshelf speaker or satellite speaker. That's pretty rare for anything you'd be using for home theater. So yeah, I wouldn't say you got to go looking for somebody who makes bipoles. Don't go for dipoles anymore. That's really not what I would recommend. So yeah, monopoles is easy. Just use those.
Luke. So first up, Luke wanted to let us know that he had indeed set his Yamaha RX-A 2050 receiver output left and right subwoofers because that's what he has.
Yeah.
So he tried our advice of setting it to mono subwoofer output, and it sounds so much better. So he says, thank you for that. I think I was here for that question.
You were here for that one, yep.
All right, he's running a 7.2.2 Atmos configuration with top middle speakers. He'd like to add 2 more overhead speakers to make it a 7.2.4 configuration, but doesn't see any option to do that on his RX-A 2050. Is he just overlooking something? I have no clue. Is it that it doesn't do it, or is it that he's got to get rid of the 7 so that he can run 5 and then he can do 4 up top?
Well, the answer is the A2050 maxes out at 9 speakers.
So you got to get rid of the surround backs if you want to do top fronts.
Right. So if you want 4 overheads, you can have 4 overheads, but you can only then have 5 quote unquote ear level speakers. You can't do 7.2.4 with the A2050. 9 speakers maximum. So yeah, you'd have to literally, in your case, you'd have to buy a different receiver to do 7.2.4. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it's just a limitation of the thing. 9 speakers max. That's what it is.
And last but not least, Dan. This comes from Twitter. He asks, I guess, in 2 separate tweets. Yeah. How can you tell if your AV receiver supports HDR10 and Dolby Vision? I am guessing Rob's going to tell you a list that exists on the internet because we certainly aren't going to maintain that for you.
Nope. Over on AVS Forum, Scott Wilkinson is doing a great job of keeping a list of all the devices that support Dolby Vision. So he's got a big list of AV receivers. So first of all, we'll have this in the show notes, avrant.com for this episode. We'll have the link to that list. If you just want to look up on Google, if you just put in AVS Forum Dolby Vision Home, right? You put in those words, it'll be the first result.
Okay.
Dolby Vision at home is the name of the article. So yeah, what I will say, we've heard now from Market Accessories for Less, and actually Richard Gunther over at the Digital Media Zone, he got in touch directly with some folks at Pioneer, and they're like, yeah, we're working on adding Dolby Vision to some Pioneer receivers that aren't presently in that AVS forum list. So it seems like that is a thing that is happening, and it makes sense. They're wholly owned by Onkyo now. Onkyo's little bit older models are getting the Dolby Vision update, they've said. So yeah, other than that slight omission, it's a very comprehensive list that Scott Wilkinson's put together.
Okay. And lastly, he asked, what looks better, 1080p, Blu-ray, or streaming 4K? How good your connection?
And is that 4K with HDR or 4K without HDR?
Yeah, there's a lot of options there. And how good is the Blu-ray you're looking at too? Because frankly, I love Dread, the movie Dread. I love it. There's some absolutely horrendous scenes in there where it's just grainy and awful, and clearly they were like, we should reshoot this. We do not have any more money to reshoot.
That's right. No time, no money, didn't have the cameras on hand, whatever it was.
Right, whatever it was, it looks, some of it looks like I swear some of it looks like they shot it with an iPhone. But in the low light, it's just so bad. But there's all sorts of options here. So which looks better? Depends. All things being equal, best of all worlds. I think if it depends, it would then depend on how close you sit to the screen. But if you get streaming 4K with HDR, that should, and you've got the bandwidth for it, and it's a really good, source and all that, I think that should look better.
Yeah, to me, HDR is a pretty big deal in this. If it's 4K with HDR, I'd probably favor that even over the Blu-ray. But if it's 4K without HDR, personally, most of the time, I'll probably end up preferring the Blu-ray. Now, you got to consider the Blu-ray probably is between 30 and 40 megabits per second, although that is H.264 compression, right? Yeah. The 4K streaming, though, most of those movies they're still about like maybe in total 5 or 6 gigabytes for the whole darn movie in 4K resolution. Now, yes, that's better compression, H.265 compression, but man, oh man, are they compressing the heck out of those streaming things in the 4K resolution. So I still think it looks pretty darn good, but overall, even though it's technically higher resolution, I usually favor the 1080p Blu-ray unless HDR is there.
All right, we're going to end this now. We got Michael is for next week. And I know we've already got some questions in, and I saw we got some comments about what we're talking about right now already.
Yep.
So we will be talking about those next week. Again, we want to say thank you to our listeners of the week. We want to thank Barry, Todd, Timothy, and Luke for going to www.avrant.com and leaving us a donation. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Barry, Todd, Timothy, Luke, thank you so much for those donations. Really appreciate it. And if somehow we missed your donation, please let us know. We want to thank you on the podcast.
Or you can always just donate again, and we'll notice it this time. Don't do that. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For all the rest of our contact information, see the beginning of the show. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.